In this video, I'm going to walk you through the steps of connecting an authentication provider, Azure AD B2C, to the Power Pages site. Now, it's a multi-step process. So there are essentially four steps. The first step is kind of a pre-step for configuring an Azure Active Directory B2C. The step two is about creating an Azure AD B2C and configuring the user flows associated with it. Step number three is register an app. Step four is configuring the Power Pages auth configuration by gathering information from all the steps above. So this video is basically divided into three parts, so we can go through one by one. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the steps of creating an Azure Active Directory B2C tenant. Before we go to register an Azure AD B2C tenant, first thing we need to do some actions on the subscription level. So I'm in my subscription. So this is the default subscription which I have currently. I need to go into a resource provider in my Azure subscription and find out Azure Active Directory, Microsoft.Azure Active Directory. So I'll just type Azure and then it will show Azure Active Directory. Provider is not registered. I click on it and then I just say register. So it might take a while to register my resource provider. Once it is done, now this resource provider is registered in my Active Directory. Okay. Now what you need to do is now again go to home and then you see a button called as create a resource. Click on create a resource, type in Azure AD B2C. The moment you type in Azure AD B2C, click on create Azure Active Directory B2C, create a new Azure AD tenant. Let me call this name as Girish. INC is the name of the organization, and maybe I'll just type in Giri 007. Okay, resource group. I already have a Giri resource group, so I'll select that resource group. You can create a new one. Now it says initial domain name already exists, so maybe I need to give something else. So I'll just call it as Giri 007 001. Okay, let me see if that name exists. Uh, no, so this name doesn't exist, and I'm good to go with this. Now, let me click on Review plus Create. All good. Click on Create, and my tenant creation is in progress. This will take a few minutes, and I'll just wait the time till the time this tenant gets provisioned. Okay, look like the tenant is provisioned. As I see from the message, tenant creation was successful. Click here to navigate to your tenant. Now, let me go to the home page now, and if I type in B2C tenants and I click on B2C tenants, I can see the tenant which is provisioned over here. Okay. Now this is the tenant which was provisioned. I click on here and then I will see the details of the tenant. If I click on open B2C tenant, this is where I navigate to the Azure AD B2C tenant. Wait for it to get loaded. And yes, now as you see over here on the top left, this is the name of the tenant, and this tenant is now completely active. uh, how do I switch back to the tenant is I need to click on maybe settings, and I can see directories plus subscription. Now if you see here, the default tenant is 0k If I want to switch to this tenant, I need to click on switch. However, the current selection is Girish INC, which is an Azure Active Directory B2C tenant. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the steps of creating a user flow in an Azure AD B2C tenant. Now, as you see in the screen, 0k directory name is my Azure Active Directory tenant, and Girish INC is a directory name for Azure Active Directory B2C. Now, if I Click on the search bar, and if I click on B2C tenant, I see that there is one Azure AD B2C tenant which is already being provisioned. I click on this. As this B2C tenant is loaded, it will show me set of properties. I click on open B2C tenant, and now I'm technically inside an Azure AD B2C tenant. Now you will see the screen of we are preparing your B2C directory being loaded. On the left hand side, you'll see something called as a user flows. If I click on user flows and I click on plus new user flow, I will be presented with the screen. The first option is sign up and sign in, which is a basic fundamental flow for creating a user account or signing into the user account. I click on this and I get two options, standard and recommended. Standard is the old version of the user flow for sign up, sign in. I'll select the recommended version and I click on create. The moment I do that, it will ask me for name. Now, as this is a sign up, sign in process, I'll just name it sign up, sign in. I want people to sign up using an email. Type of method is an email. No MFA enforcements. There's no condition access policy. And collect attribute and written claim. Let me select given name, uh, maybe city, email address. Okay. And if I click on show more, I will be presented with a good amount of screen. I'll put the written claim as email addresses. This is just my preference. Click on OK. I click on create, and my user flow for sign up and sign in will get provisioned. I'll click on new user flow, and then now I will create a password reset flow. Now again, two options, recommended and the standard or legacy. Standard legacy is the older version. I will go for the newer version, which is a part of recommended. I'll click on create and I'll call it now as a reset password. Reset password using email address. Type of method is email. MFA enforcement is off, like the sign up and sign in. And the claim, I can put given name, maybe city. I click on show more. I can put email addresses, and I click on OK. The moment I do that, I get a button of create, click on create, and now the password reset policy is being created. Now, how do I see what this policy contains? If I click on sign up, sign in, it will be presented with a screen of showing the properties, identity provider, user attribute, which I'm not going to go through it now, but I'll cover that in my later sessions. Click on run user flow, and you will see we'll be presented with a URL, to run this user flow. Now, as there are no application registered against it, I'll just leave it as it is for now. But this is how you run the user flow. Okay, same thing goes for uh, the user flow for reset password. You click on the reset password user flows, and you run the user flow. Now, as no applications are registered against this user flow, it is not loading any value over here. Okay, so so that's all about creating a user flow against an Azure Active Directory B2C tenant. I have this site already created named as Girish Diamond. Now, this site is configured for some authentication. We just need to watch and see what this authentication implies for this particular site. So, what I'll do, I'll click on edit, and the moment I click on edit, it will be loaded in my design studio, and I will be seeing this interface. Now, on the left hand side, if I click on setup, and under authentication, if I click on identity providers, I will see that there are multiple options for logging into the portal. Now, one of the option which I'm interested is Azure Active Directory B2C. If I click on configure, I'll be presented with a screen to configure the Azure AD B2C. Now, I will just keep all the defaults in the first screen. So select a login provider, Azure Active Directory B2C, protocol OpenID Connect, provider name Azure AD B2C. Next, now here's a lot of things which I need to configure. Now, the first thing what I want to know is the authority URL. Okay, what I'll do, I'll open a notepad and I'll start making a note of it. So I'll just type in, I need to fill in authority, then I need to get a client ID, then I need to get a redirect URL, and then default policy ID, and then I need to get password, reset policy ID, and a valid issuers. Okay, right. So once I get all these things, then I think my Azure AD B2C settings can be configured in Power Pages. Now, prerequisite before we even proceed with this, what you need to ensure that you need to have an Azure Active Directory B2C tenant created. Now I've already created it ahead of time, and I have already created two flows, sign up, sign in, and reset password. Now, if you don't know how to create an Azure Active Directory B2C, I have one video for that. If you don't know how to create a user flow, I have one video for that. So do watch that out, because this video is a prerequisite to configure the Azure Active Directory B2C for Power Pages. Now, with all said things done, I have two flows already created. Now, there's another thing which we may need to do is we need to get a client ID. How do we get a client ID? I click on app registrations. I click on new registration. So I'm registering an app. Now, I'll call this as Diamond Power Pages B2C. Supported account type, account in any identity provider or org directory for authenticating users with user flow. Redirect URI, select web. Now, what do I put over here in the redirect URI? Now, you remember in the screen, there is something called as a reply URL. What I'll do, I'll copy this and I'll paste it over here. Now, the moment I do that, I click on register and my app is registered. So once your app is registered, you may need to fetch something, the client ID. I just copy the client ID, open my notepad, make a note of it. Enter. So that's done. Uh, with regards to authentication, uh, under authentication, you will see something under implicit grant and hybrid flows. It's very essential to click on access tokens and the ID token. Click on save. Your app is now completely registered. Okay, so first step done. Let me go back to Azure Active Directory B2C. Now, we have already created ahead of time user flows for sign up, sign in, and reset password. Now, let me find that out. Okay, so sign up, sign in. If I click on sign up, sign in, now this is actually the name. This is actually the name which we want. Okay, now this corresponds to this value, default policy ID. Okay, and password reset policy ID, I'll show you what it is, but let me copy first this. For this password reset policy ID, go back to the Azure AD B2C user flow, go to reset password, copy this text, put it in my notepad. Okay. Um, Now, authority, redirect URL, and valid issuers. Now, where do we get all these values now? Let us go back here, find out what it is. Authority URL, the issuer URL for sign up and sign in policy user flow. So, how do we get that? Go to your user flow, sign up, sign in. The moment you go there, just run the user flow and see what happens. The moment you click on run user flow, you will be presented with a URL. Click on that URL. The moment you click on that URL, a JSON appears. Now, in the JSON, you will see some issuer. Just copy paste the URL. Okay, I'm just copy pasting this URL, and this is my authority or redirect URL. Okay, sign up, sign in. Now, again, under valid issuers, what we may need to do is we need to get some ID. Okay, valid issuers and authority. Now, Under valid issuers, it says a comma delimited list of issuer that include issuer of the sign in sign up user flow and the issuer of the password reset user flow. Let me go back to the sign up sign in user flow. Now, if I click on the settings under properties, okay, I see some option called as token compatibility settings. Let me select this and let me select this over here. Okay. Now, this is the one setting which we may need to do for both. Okay. For both the flows. So I'm doing it for sign up, sign in, and I'll be doing the same thing for password reset as well. So in the password reset, go to properties, click on token compatibility setting, click here, reset password, save it. Okay. Now, let me do one thing again. Let me go into user flows and click on sign up, sign in. Now, here, what I'm going to do is run this user flow. Get this URL of OpenID configuration, copy this URL for sign up, sign in, and paste it in my notepad. Valid issuers, again, copy paste the same thing, but now put a comma and copy the URL of reset password. Run the user flow, click on the URL on OpenID configuration. It will generate a URL. Copy that. This is the issuer. Control C and copy paste over here. Okay, so valid issue is good. Password reset policy ID is good. Default policy ID is good. What is authority? Let me check that. So enter authority URL. It's a issuer URL defined in the metadata of sign up and sign in. Okay, so sorry about this. Redirect URL. Now, redirect URL is already present, so we need not do anything. So the one which I was showing you over here is technically authority URL. Okay, so there's nothing called as redirect URL because that's already present. So if you see here, authority URL, whatever URL you get over here, just do a copy paste over here, okay, which you have already done till here, and put a comma and then copy uh, the reset password URL. Now I'll remove the double quotes because there are some double quotes which I see over here because we don't want that double quotes to be present. Now, I think we are good with this. What we can do is copy the content one by one. Authority comes here, client ID, default policy ID, so it's a policy ID, valid issuers. Now, once you're done with this, it's good enough to save and confirm it. The moment you click on confirm, I think this should be saving those records and setting up those Azure AD B2C settings. Click on close and maybe let me make this as a default provider now. Okay. Now I'm just making it as a default provider. It says setting Azure AD B2C as a default provider will automatically redirect user to the B2C page. Upon sign in, user will not be redirected to the portal sign in page, and I'm okay with it. Now there is an option to sync. So sync all your configuration changes and all the configuration changes will get synced up. Now, as a matter of fact, I may also go to Power Platform Admin Center, open the site, and do some sort of a reset so that all the configuration changes get persisted over a period of time. So how do I go there? I go to resources, I go to Power Pages site, Our site name is Diamond, so I go in Diamond site, go to manage, and what I'll do is I restart the site. This might take a while, but it's worth the wait. So once the configuration settings are done, then let's view the page. Now, this is the site, Girish Diamond. Let me preview the page in the desktop. Now, what happens is the portal doesn't get loaded automatically. It will show you the screen and give you two options, Azure AD B2C, Azure AD. I'll go for Azure AD B2C, and it will present you with a screen to register an account. So maybe I will use my personal account. So I don't have a username and password as of now. So I may have to sign up. Uh, Once I receive that verification code, I need to confirm that. So I got that code. I verify the code and I can put the new password now. Now the new password, I'll just put, okay, city, I'll just put this one, give a name, Girish, create. The moment I do that, it will register that user in my Azure Active Directory B2C. I'll not save this. And if I go in my Azure Active Directory, let me quickly go into the Azure Active Directory to see if the changes are persisted or not. We go to Azure Active Directory. So now I'm in the Azure Active Directory B2C. So if I click on users, I'll see that a user has already been created. So this is that new user which I've recently created. Now this email address girish.uppal@gmail.com is the user principal name. Now, if you see in the profile, I can now view this profile, and I can now go into the locked page, which was earlier not available for the regular user. So, yeah, so I think that's it. So, this is how you log into uh, a Power Pages site using Azure Active Directory B2C. So, that's it, folks. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in my next video.